What I'm really addicted to, man, is I'm addicted to spreading love. The way I see it is when I bring somebody on my show, when I go on somebody else's show, it's love. We're building community. We're getting stories out there. And really, that's how it all started.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory, walk.
Warning! This is a public service announcement. The Walk in Victory podcast is where we have conversations purposed to evolve lives. You may not want to evolve. Then tune into another bleeping podcast. Everyone else, enjoy the show. And here's our host.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory walks, you have to realize the climate and the time that we're living in. And I say that to say, when I was coming up, we had 1, 2, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, seven television channels. Then we had like Telemundo, but we didn't speak Spanish, so I'm not counting those. We had 3 major: ABC, NBC, CBS. And the local news guy was so vital and so important because we got news at 6 o'clock and then 11 o'clock. So anything that happened in between, you were really unaware of. It's not like we had information constantly in front of us. The 11 o'clock news was the shorter news. It was a half hour. So the 6 o'clock news during the rush was an hour. We had a radio station, 10 Wins. You give us 10 minutes, we bring you the world. They would give you news cycles every 10 minutes. And it would, well, so you can get information, but it was really more localized. And then you had World News Tonight. That was with Dan Rather. So he became one of the voices of the industry. And you trusted your newsman. You trusted the media guy. There wasn't this thing where the media was slanted by their political views. So to say, you couldn't really hear it in the way they present it, because the impartiality was crucial for the time that we were in. This is when Ronald Reagan was president. We had one enemy, that was nuclear war and Russia, right? And it didn't really, everything seemed simple, although things were really, really complex. When you look at the history of what was going on around everything that we missed, we didn't really get it. But today, we live in a different time, where the voice of mainstream media, so the mainstream news person, it's not as loud as it used to be. There's still a sense of prominence about being on a television channel, so to say. You know, when you can say that, hey, my stuff runs on ABC or my stuff runs on CNN. However, even those who have positions what they would seem to be permanent still has to carve out their own voice, their own platform on podcasts and YouTubes in order to stay relevant, because you can't wait no more in order to get your message out. And that's the time that we live in, where you can now start to do something locally for small businesses, locally for small churches, locally, and really put yourself and them on the map. If you have the innovation, the idea, you don't need a whole lot of stuff to start. You do need to be able to be loquacious and inspirational. Now they have things where you don't even need to show your face, and faceless. Who wants to have a faceless page, right? You want to have some face. But this is the place that we live in, and we're going to talk about media and the media opportunities that are available, and see how Adam built his empire. How you doing, sir?
Man, I'm so excited to be here. And if I had some intros like that before, man, I'm telling you, you're the voice right here. That's what I'm talking about off the cuff. Thank you for having me, NaRon, man. This is awesome.
No, thank you for being with us. If you don't mind, I guess they can probably already figure it out. But you don't mind telling our audience about yourself and what it is that you do.
Yeah, appreciate that and appreciate the opportunity. So, again, Adam Torres is my name. I've been in this business now going on 9 years. I've done over 6,000 interviews. And to hear that number, man, I tell you, it seems like just the other day. I did 3 interviews before this one. I got like 5 more after. I love it. Some people say I'm addicted to podcasting. I love podcasting. I love putting out content. What I'm really addicted to, man, is I'm addicted to spreading love. The way I see it is when I bring somebody on my show, when I go on somebody else's show, it's love. We're building community. We're getting stories out there. And really, that's how it all started. So, some of the business lines or things I'm known for podcasting, book publishing, have a bunch of books out there. Our platform, Mission Matters, is a pretty big platform. If you Google it, go to missionmatters.com. We've launched over 200 shows there. I host 8 different shows, and we've managed to start from a very small startup, bootstrapped media company, and we've grown now to where now I am on site covering some of the biggest conferences in the world, like the Milken Global Conference in Beverly Hills, FII Priority in Miami, where the president was the opening keynote. All this started from a little podcast, man, and just really the dream to go out there, spread love, and to give a platform for other people to be able to share their story. So that's where it all started.
Well, let's start from the origin story. Most teachers, if they was to teach somebody about podcasting,
Mm.
they would go with this whole blueprint. And I don't know who made this blueprint, but this is blueprint. This could be not a blueprint. Let's put it that way. With you start a podcast, but you're connected to selling something. But that's not the way that you started. That's not the way that I started. Like, I didn't start to sell. I started to have a voice and to call out my ideas and to talk to people, interested people like yourself. Well, what was your origin story? Why did you start? Was it something that you always figured that you can do?
Well, it started with actually creating content. So it started even before the podcast. So my beginning was with this little platform that for the youngins out there, you never heard of it, but it was called Periscope. That's one of the original streaming platforms where you just hit the button and people from all around the world could find you. At this time, I still had a day job. I was still working in finance. And what I would do is on my lunch break, I was just play with this little platform called Periscope, and I would run all around Century City on my lunch break. And I was just I mean, I was in finance, so if you can picture suit and tie and all of that, I'm right next to Beverly Hills, and so there's always interesting cars, interesting things, an interesting view. And so I would just literally just be taking people around on Periscope and talking to them and just saying, "Hey, look at this car, look at this, what's going on?" On my lunch break. And I grew an audience of thousands, like, from all around the world that would follow, and when that happened, it became a little bit more serious because I just understood. I was like, "This is powerful, like, people are connected, there's an opportunity here." And so my very first show I created was actually on Periscope, and it was called The Gratitude Show. And all I did, man, I was so scared. I was so scared to be in front of camera. I knew nothing. Again, financial. I was a finance guy, and I had one concept in that show because I didn't know how to talk in front of camera. I didn't know. I was just scared. So I'm like, one question: What are you grateful for? And I swear, I would sit on that thing, and there'd be people all around the world that would just come and talk about what they were grateful for, and it kind of built from there to YouTube. And then it built. I would get ideas and listen to the audience, and they would give other ideas, and they'd be like, "Oh, somebody came up with at some point like this, it was like the gratitude, an assignment." So every day I would give an assignment to the audience. One of them, for example, was, text somebody that you know in your phone that you love or that you care about, and just tell them that you're grateful for them. You're just grateful that they're in your life. And I did that, and what was crazy is people would do it, and then I'd get these comments on YouTube or even in the live, the people that would show up to the live version on Periscope, and they'd be like, get these comments like, "Oh my gosh, like I texted my wife that I was grateful for her, and she's like she's like crying. Like she doesn't remember if I've ever just told her I was grateful for her and thank you so much. And it's not that the gentleman wasn't grateful, the husband wasn't, it's just something that he never verbalized and she wasn't used to it. So I just saw like the power to help people through these mediums. And then as it got more advanced, it evolved into a podcast and the shows evolved and we became more professional. And then there's other things that grew. But really what it started with, which again, just the idea, like how can I help? How can I? And that's what it was, the gratitude show. And the gratitude show evolved from a group text that I had with friends that was just, and if you remember way back when for BlackBerry, like way back when you had the little do all the youngins are like, what are you guys talking? BlackBerry, isn't that like a gaming company? No, it used to be the best. So you remember BlackBerry? I used to have this group channel and a group chat, and we basically talk about with friends, and it was just a close knit type of group of friends, and it was to get everybody motivated and pumped. Like, hey, what are you grateful for today? Just to get us focused on the positive. So it was really an evolution that led to the podcast ultimately.
So I'm glad that first of all, we all remember our babies, right? But I'm glad that you so detailed, vividly remember um, what was happening, where you were, how you got going. Because I want somebody who's listening, you don't necessarily have to have a landing spot. You don't necessarily have to have a product to sell. And I know that a lot of times people tell you to find your landing spot. People tell you to find your product to sell. Um, and for you to be that transparent is awesome. But when now did you pivot where you got your topics of influence down? You started to look at the landscape of media, and started to look at a
Mhm.
broader sense of what media could entail,
Yeah.
book
So
publishing, and all of that other stuff.
So
Yeah.
I'll give you, and I've never tried to really verbalize this, so I'll give you some stages, but I'm not gonna be the type to lead with, there's 4 stages, because maybe there's a 5th, and then you're gonna be like, "Oh, you didn't count right," or, "Oh, maybe there's a 3rd." Just let's call that early days, just to put it on that shelf, what I just described. The next part of the evolution, so we'll say step 2, if you will, that was, which I didn't know was happening, right? Was it's all in retrospect, is I'm always listening to the audience. I'm always listening and listening, and all of my greatest ideas that are attributed to me, they ain't my ideas. And I tell people that all the time. I get too much credit, but what I do pretty well is I listen. I listen to my audience. I listen to see what's working and what worked for somebody else doesn't mean it's going to work for me, right? So I'm listening to whose attention I have, which is my audience. So the next evolution of that was I started, and this was my early days of book publishing. I put out my very first book, and I didn't want to do a book. I'm like, I'm not doing a book, and like, okay, you got to do a book. And who is they? My mentor, Christopher Kai. So he's known as the billionaire networker, ChristopherKai.com. He's like, Adam, you got to do a book. And I'm like, I don't want to do a book. Like, and at this point, I'm a finance guy, so please forgive me. But I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I'm like, only broke people do books. What do I care about a book? I want to sell a $3 product, a $5 product. What do I care about that? Like, I've learned from that the power of books now, but I'm just being accurate on where I was at that point in my journey. And as a quick sidebar, we've published over 400 authors as a book publishing company, so I understand the power of books now. But in the beginning, I didn't. So I put out this first book and it was called Money Matters. And out of that, I got this tremendous response just based off I think, the authenticity of my story. I mean, I didn't grow up with money. I didn't grow up in finance. I grew up in Detroit. I grew up in Southwest Detroit specifically, which wasn't a very nice place during the 80s, we'll say. So for those that know, so my story resonated and it struck a chord and it led me to doing things like speaking engagements as far away as China. And all of a sudden I was on doing all these gigs and I didn't even know you get paid for speaking. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. This is great. So out of that, I saw that there was a potential to really help more people. And out of that evolution, that then led me to start the first podcast, which was Money Matters Top Tips. And that would have been the first part of the brand and the first evolution. And really the concept there was we thought it was going to be something to where we could showcase and network and bring on other business owners and other people that we wanted to do business with ultimately. But then it grew into something completely different, man. I did over 1,500 episodes on that particular channel, and we published books, we did a bunch of other things, and then you could call that the next piece of the journey, if you will. But then I still didn't know like the true power of this. The true power of this came at the next stage. It's when, I'm a man of faith, and I'll just tell you up front that all of this is God, first of all, like to just throw that out there. This is all a God. But what happened is I was interviewing somebody, and I was interviewing them, and they said, "Hey, Adam," it was just a random comment. It was like, Adam, money matters, but mission matters too. And I was like, man, it was like a lightning bolt. It's like, I swear, God just like punched me in the stomach. He's like, "Adam, come here," grab my ear. He's like, "Come on, Adam, like, listen, you have this, gift that I've given you. Now, what do you do with it? Like, is it just about money?" And so I have another co-founder here. His name is Chirag Sagar, and he's a very a gentle man. He's an amazing man. He's just great. He's a great person, a great soul. And I talked to him, and I'm like, "Hey, what do you think about the company like Mission Matters? What do you think about that?" And he's like, so we talk about it, no real thought of it. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's whatever. We just move on. About a month later, he calls me back, and he's like, "Hey, Adam, what do you think about the name Mission Matters?" And I'm like, "Man, Chirag, that is a great idea." I'm like, "I'm telling you right now, though, I mean, the best ideas is when you can plant that seed, and then it's their idea, right? It's fine." And I'm like, and he doesn't even, I tell this story all the time. He just act like he don't remember. He remembers. And I'm like, "All right, Chirag, I know the web domain's taken, and I know it's going to be, I never looked it up, but if we got enough money in the bank account, I don't care how much it is, we're going to buy it, and we're going to do it if we're going to do it, or I'm not going to look it up, but you got to commit now before I look." He says, "All right, Adam, I'm committed. We'll do it." So we look, it was of course already taken, because why wouldn't missionmatters.com be taken? Of course it would be. We spent more money on a domain than I ever thought I would in my life. It was bought pretty quickly through a broker. And then 9 days later, when you talk about jumping off the ledge, when you talk about a restart and walking in faith, just to put this in perspective, we already had a brand built. We already had the website built. We already had over 1,500, if my memory serves me correctly, over 2,000 interviews on that channel. That you talk about the amount of labor of doing 2,000 interviews. You're a podcaster. That is no joke. So years of my life and hard work and like all the learning process. We'd already published books under Money Matters. So if you Google or anything like that, you'll see all this content, Money Matters. So on a dime, we stop the entire brand and start over within 9 days. We now segment, we create 8 different shows that are all segmented for different audiences. We start the new book brand. We start over 30 social media channels for all of the different shows. So the cumulative amount is, I think, 32 or so channels. And then we get working on our next book, A Mission Matters. And then we get really clear on what it is we're doing in our true calling within this. And then, step, and you're rewarded for whatever that's worth. And I just like to say, God's like, thank you. And he brought us to that next level. So let's call this part 3 of the journey. And I'll pause there.
No, I'm glad that you shared those things, because when you are in business, there are times when you pivot. First of all, what we are doing is a business, right?
Yep.
And some people do it in the beginning for a hobby, but I often tell people that, people, "Oh man, I could just do this with my eyes closed." I said, "Yeah," until you find out the guy next to you making $100,000 a year. I can do it for free. Now you feel like somebody's taking advantage of you. So there is a part where money has to matter, but the name of our production company is called Principle Matters, because the mission has to matter, the money has to matter, the principle has to matter. When you operate with those worldviews, then it's easy to find the message.
Yeah.
Because you're not driven by local news or what's happening or what's trending. I don't have to look for trends to find out what I'm going to be talking about today, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a trend-driven podcast, which alienates sometimes an audience when you're trying to build an audience. And when you're going out and you're telling people who are not driven by whatever media wind is blowing or whatever trend wind is blowing.
Yeah.
How do you help them to get over the hump of trying to look for the audience to rise overnight, but really getting in the long haul and getting your steps up and getting your episodes out?
Yeah. I think the first thing is to set a proper expectation. I think expectations is what gets people in this business. And expectation is the first piece of that, and then knowledge, like actually understanding what you're doing. So for example, an expectation that I think many make incorrectly is thinking like the virality or like how a podcast is going to go viral possibly. What they don't necessarily understand is unlike just the simple thought process of the audience and the audience's attention. So what you're vying for is this: your post goes viral on Instagram. Great, amazing, happy for you. And you get all these likes and all this engagement. Maybe you get some new followers, right? Like how much time did that audience actually invest in you? A millisecond to actually hit a like button because they thought it was interesting. Great for somebody to listen to your podcast episode, let's say you're doing at least a 30-minute, 20, 30, 40, 45-minute, an hour long show. The opportunity cost of their attention and time, if they're watching a 30-minute show, is they could have watched a 30-minute Netflix episode that had $50,000 or $500,000 in production value with XYZ celebrity or star. So if somebody gave you 30 minutes of their time to listen to your show, like respect that, value that, cherish that. Like I think people get a little bit off because they don't even understand the profession of what they're doing. Podcasting developed and evolved out of broadcasting, out of the old radio show days. Think about that. When you were, a kid driving in the car with your mom and you were listening to the radio on the way there, you listened for years to know that, to get a feeling, to know that host's name and to know their voice and to have that trust built. It's a real relationship. It's very different than other mediums, than other social media types, even than YouTube. It's very different than that because this is a passive learning and a passive listening experience. Like they're going to listen to you while they're in their car. They're going to listen to you while they're at the gym. They're going to listen to you while they're walking their dog. They're letting you into very intimate, many times, portions of their day and their life. If they're listening to your podcast while they got a 15-minute break at work, think about the intimacy of that. And even just the physicality of it, that like if they're listening in AirPods, they literally put your voice in their head. It's going to sound a little weird, but you're in an orifice of their body, like that literally. And you're talking to them, and out of that respite from the day and from the work, and they finally have a bit of time to relax and rest, and they want to connect with you. It's insane. Like it's insane, like the level of connection that you can make with a host. So I think the first thing is just the expectations and to understand the craft of what you're doing. If you got 100 downloads, that's equivalent to you sitting for an episode. That's equivalent to you doing a keynote in front of 100 people. If you were standing in front of 100 people in your office right now delivering a speech, would you take that serious? Would you think that was a big deal? I would. It's absolutely amazing. 100 downloads is wonderful. But that expectation of it saying, oh, it's 100 downloads and maybe you got 200 likes on an Instagram post, the amount of time, the amount of attention, it's just, they're not apples to apples. So first thing is you just got to have the right expectations on even the sport you're doing and the game. If you don't even know the game you're playing and you think this is some silly, like, oh, I'm not against anybody that says they could do it in their sleep. The one thing I normally say to people like that, can you do it in your sleep for 20 years? If you can do it in your sleep for 20 years, then I'm in. And guess what? You're going to probably do pretty dang well. But a lot of people that have talent don't make it to the NBA. A lot of people that have talent don't make it to the NFL. A lot of the most talented athletes and individuals that ever walked this planet, nobody knows their name, nor will they ever. So it's the person that matches that talent with that perseverance, with that tenacity, with that dog, with that, man, I got to get it. I got to get this done. I'm not going to quit no matter what. That's who does it. So I'm in for you got talent. I'll tell you right now, I was the least talented. Let me explain how least talented I was. Maybe I still am. Who knows? I don't know. But I'll tell you this, my very first show, I was so scared. I didn't even use my name. I didn't even use my real name. I had a made up name, which actually, if you ever did a contract with me before, you'll know it says Mr. Century City. It was a name. It was a made up name for a nickname that people had given me. I was that scared. I didn't even do video for my first 2,000 episodes, maybe more. Why? Because I was deadly afraid to be on camera. Man, you turn on a camera and it was a deer in headlights. I'd be like, my name is, what's my name? I don't even know.
Well, I'm glad that you got over that, man. And here we are
Maybe
today.
I'm over it. No, I'm challenged all the time. I'm telling you, on stage, the first time I was doing something on stage, and now I do pretty much every interview format you could think of now. So, I'm in front of stage, live audience, thousands of people, hundreds of people, panels, you name it. And now I'm trying to push my craft further. I'm gonna start taking comedy lessons, not because I want to be the next stand up hit or the next I'm no Chappelle. It's fine. I'm okay with that. Man is one of a billion people, but I can learn from comedians. Can I put together 5 to 10 minutes of comedy and be on stage and do that? I think I can. Is it the hardest sport ever? Yes, but that's me trying to up my game. Is that going to make my podcast better? Man, of course. To learn from other people and to learn another part or add that tool to your tool belt at whatever level I can, that's what's up.
When I first started public speaking, I was in entertainment since I was like in my teens. But when I first started public speaking, seriously, I was about 23, 24. And part of what I did for personal training, I was heavy into comedy. George Carlin, like the great storytellers and all that. But I would listen, I would close my eyes, turn off all of the lights. And that's when we had tapes. And I would play the tapes or the CDs. And I would just listen for the cadence, listen for the space and the tone. Because my thing was, if you can get a laugh, you can get an amen.
Amen. I'll give you one right now.
And just the way that a comedian is so economical with their words, they choose the right word in order to make the joke resonate, and they know when to pause, when to speed the audience up, when to do all of these things, and I bring that into, excuse me, what I do here with the podcast world, because I have all of these like 20. I'll be 50 years old, 25 plus years of public speaking. But it's different turning on a microphone. I grew up speaking in front of an audience, right? So just turning on the microphone and hit record, not getting feedback back, not having that energy to feedback on is totally a different ball game, but it's still the same idea. You still have to have your stuff together. You still have to know what lane, what we call now topics of influence. And that's why what I think is brilliant that you pointed out. You segment your audiences. You know that this topic, although I'm going to talk about it, this is not how I built this audience, and this is not the topic that I'm going to give them. And I had to do that. My second podcast is called One Ministries Network, because during COVID, Walk in Victory started turning into a religious channel, and that's not the way that we build our audience. So I said, let me segment the audience. That's the marketing mind coming in, and give those people who want that, this, those people who want this, that. And, so I'm glad to hear that from a seasoned vet as yourself, that was a smart way to go. But what was your fault?
In retrospect, though, that wasn't intentional. That was in retrospect. Remember, I started with one, and it was like, so for everybody listening, just remember that part of the story. We had thousands of episodes, and I look back at that catalog of Money Matters top tips, and maybe only 20% of the content was actually about money.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was in retrospect, learning backwards, adjusting, and like learning from, I won't say the mistakes. We were still building an audience, but it was just trying to get better every day.
Yeah. So now we're up to number 4.
So now what happens and thank you for keeping count, man. This is what I'm talking. This is what man, put bad pretty better. Leave some reviews in here, 5 stars. Come on. Remember the conversation. So number 4 is when I as this grew and as Mission Matters grew and as the influence grew, I saw a demand, and this is where I've made the transition. I'm still 100% a podcaster. I'm still a content creator, but I started thinking about the broader landscape of what we do, and the word media, and what does that mean? Like, I come from the old school thought process of, the broadcaster. It's not about his opinion. The reason you're bringing the guest on and the reason why you're interviewing them is to get their opinion and to get the content out there so that people are educated and understand that person's view. So we're not actually an influencer platform. When you listen to my shows, maybe 80% of it's going to be the guest talking. And I have people from both sides of politics, from views, from other things, because I want this to be a safe place for people to come share their ideas and for them to be heard. So I have both audiences, you'll say, and I want to bring that old school broadcasting style of things back into the media side of things, because our media is very, very, like, you know what you're going to get when you go to Fox, you know what you're going to get when you go to somewhere, you already know. And there was a time when, believe it or not, for the younger people, where it wasn't full of only their opinions and the broadcaster or the anchor wasn't giving his opinions. There was a difference between just traditional broadcasting and what you see today. So that being said, the next evolution of where this has gone is I do cover some of the biggest events in the world, and I do cover some of the biggest conferences, and I do interview I think, some of the most interesting people in the world that are doing things today, business leaders and otherwise, and I give them that platform to be able to tell their story. But I also take a different approach, because I also want to view this as a bit of history, a bit of a historian component. And I'll give you just one quick example. I was covering the Milken conference, and I have on there, for those that don't know what that is, that's one of the most important, probably the top 2-3 conferences in the world, like Davos, being up there with Davos and some of the others. Like, that's top 2 to 3 conferences in the world. And it's held in Beverly Hills once a year. It's their global conference. And you name it, from presidents to top people of industry, the who's who, they're all there. So it's like something like $40,000 a ticket, just a regular ticket, just to give you some context there. So I have on the chief economist for the Milken Institute on there, and nothing against Bloomberg, nothing against Yahoo, like none of the other guys that are there. Okay, these are our whatever, but I like to punch above our weight, right? They got, like, thousands of employees. We got a little over 30. So just to be for clear communication, anybody listening to this and not trying to, but the way that I approach the interview is a little bit different. So they may ask the chief economist for Milken. They may say, tell me about inflation. Tell me about what's happening next year. Like, they want to know the metrics of the day. What's going to happen? I like to say it's very secular. It's like it's going to be gone. Like, that interview and that word and whatever information they gave, once the new numbers are out, it's gone. Who cares? He was either right or wrong, or who cares? So in my case, I asked a different question to the gentleman, and I'd asked him, so when did you first learn about Michael Milken? Like, how did you first learn about this conference? And he tells me this story, man. I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, this is gold. You know how when you're interviewing somebody and you got gold? I guarantee you nobody else has this content. So he gives this amazing story about when he first became a fan of Michael Milken and understood what he was doing. And then he was like, yeah, I want to be on this team. He talks about when Michael Milken was originally looking and seeking and trying to get the funding so that CNN could be launched. And people told him that he was crazy. Who in the world would ever want to watch a 24-hour news channel? That's ridiculous. That's stupid. Obviously, the deals got done, and now we see and we know what CNN is, right? But that's what the type of content I'm aiming to get. I want to get not only what's happening that day and like in my time period, but I want to also create evergreen content. And I want this to be a voice or a treasured trove of information for future generations to look back, because once upon a time, it was only the people that, were super wealthy or, owned the books, owned the channels. They all wrote our history. Now we all have the power to write our own history and to give our voice for whatever segment we belong to, we're part of, whether it's socioeconomic, ethnic, whatever it is, however you want to draw your lines and say that that's what you represent, doesn't matter to me. It's whatever you say. Now you get to help tell the story of your existence here. And that's powerful because in the future, when that gentleman, if his kids, his grandkids, his great grandkids want to know what, grandpa or great grandpa did, they can see that interview. And they have a document of his life so that it's not all written for him.
Yeah, it's funny because I take this similar approach to interviewing, because when you do as many podcasts as you've done, right, you tell so many of the same stories, you ask so many of the same questions. I like to dive deep and really getting to know a person, but getting beyond I call it getting beyond what a person puts in their bio or what their team puts in the bio. I like to find out, and I can tell from the first introduction what a person really is passionate about. And then let's have that conversation centered around what your passions are, because those things will last way longer. We can get into the 5 steps in order to become this or that. Go read the book. But
I think we were on 4. 4 is all I got, man. No, I'm just like,
and your story is amazing. And what you have been able to build is amazing. And one day when I grow up, I hope to be like you in the podcasting industry.
oh, come on, man. This is a journey. It's a community. And for anybody that's out there thinking of joining or creating a podcast or something, I will say nothing against the other communities, but podcasting is the only community I met where I had not met a podcaster. I met many, many that I didn't like period. YouTube, people are kind of mean on YouTube. I don't know why. Like Instagram, people are a little like, I don't know. Sometimes they get a little weird on Instagram, like, but podcasters, like, it's like you're hanging out with your buddy. Like it doesn't even the big shows, or the big ones, like there's still just a different cadence about the way they go about it and their process and their respect. I think, and I don't have any proof of this, but I think it's just my opinion. I think it's because it's so difficult in podcasting to gain an audience. You can be a superstar and you could be a superstar athlete, superstar entertainer, superstar musician that everybody knows. It doesn't mean that somebody's going to listen to your show as a podcast. I've seen many, many fail, and that's why they do like limited episodes. Okay, XYZ does a podcast. I'm not going to say any names. They're going to do 10 episodes. They release them. I know why it doesn't go past the 10 episodes. If there was a large listener base, you better believe they'd still be doing it.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard. You got to have something to say. You can't hide in a podcast. Not saying that a musician's hiding, by the way, but I just mean like you can't hide. Like a musician, by definition, maybe depending on the musician and their process and what they're doing, when they come out of an album with like 12 songs, there might have been 100 songs that didn't make it to get to that 12. Well, guess what? When you're a podcaster, all 100 of those episodes plus those 12 good ones are all going to be released to be judged. You don't get to hold back and be like, nah, I'm going to wait until I got a better episode. It doesn't work that way. So you get to see the good, the bad, the ugly. Like I have misses all the time. I'll be like, man, I messed that one up. Or dang, that host, like, come on, man, you're supposed to give me, or that guest, we're supposed to give you a little bit more. But I didn't bring it, I didn't draw it out. So it's on me as the host. It's not on the guest ever. But like Joe Rogan, I mean, he has misses, then he's number 1 in the field, like, and he's one of the best ever. And in this particular sport, and the numbers show it, right? Regardless of if somebody likes the show or not, can't argue with his numbers. Like that, it is what it is. For whatever reason.
It has
but he has misses. Everybody has misses, but in podcasts, you got to keep going, man.
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with Joe Rogan being on Shark Tank or not Shark Tank.
Fear Factor.
Fear Factor.
Yeah.
Or the MMA and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Although it is helpful to be able to say, this is what I've done, he has to carry a conversation.
And he was an entertainer. So like you did what you did before, like on your entertainment background, studying the cadence, putting yourself in the dark, listening to that. It has everything to do with that. Those experiences were his version of what you did in the dark, listening to those comedians. That's the difference.
And it's the same thing. Yeah. So there you have it, everybody. We have conversations to help evolve lives. If you are thinking about podcasting, if you are thinking about publishing a book, all of Adam's information is in the description. We've tested, tried, and proven methodologies, the failures that leads to successes, that leads to success are repetitions, repetitious Failures lead to repetitive success. If you take responsibility for the failures and learn and glean from it, not hide away and act like it didn't happen. Oh no, I wouldn't have failed if the weather didn't. Oh no, everybody would make our excuses. My last question for you, sir: what books have influenced you, impacted you? It could be fiction, nonfiction. That if you were talking, you would tell somebody you have to get these books.
E-Myth is one of the good ones. That's a good one that I feel like it would have, a lot of times people that are podcasters or otherwise, or that in the digital space, like if you didn't have a formal business education or anything like that, even if you did, E-Myth, I think is really something that's digestible, and it's something that I think it will save you a lot of time, a lot of money, at least on the money side of what we do. Like that's going to be very, very helpful. Like I'd say E-Myth would be my number one for sure. If there were some number twos, some number threes, I think I more so listen to, I'll slightly shift it, because in my present day, I don't read too many books anymore. I do like listening to different podcasts and different things. I'll tell you like, and different content. So highly recommend the Johnny Carson channel if you want to see like one of the greats and see what he did and the way he covered conversations. Also reading books like on Johnny Carson or like the greats, the Sinatra's. Like if somebody's going to be in this business and they really want to be in this business, then go back to the beginning of entertainment. So like Bob Hope's autobiography, amazing. Orson Welles' autobiography, amazing. Johnny Carson's autobiography, amazing. Like all of these build onto that lexicon of knowledge so that you actually understand the business that you're in. And the more you understand the business that you're in, if you're taking this as a business, what's going to happen is you're going to see like little clues, little tips all along the way. Howard Stern, he's got multiple books. You want to learn about interviewing, they're all interview style. So Howard Stern has one that's amazing. Any of those books are great. And they basically transcribe his interviews, but there's so many nuggets of knowledge in there that you just read it and you're like, wow, wow, wow. Another one, Seinfeld has that coffee with comedians or getting
I
coffee,
love
whatever.
that.
There's a,
He is in the car getting coffee. Yes.
there you go. They have a book. It's a coffee table book. It's a big old book and it's on my coffee table. Duh, no pun intended. No, it is. And what do I do? And it has transcriptions from those interviews. And there's gold in those things. One of the things, I'll just give you one piece. It wasn't from that book. It was from the Howard Stern book, but I really want people to go check this out. So I'll give you one nugget. Howard Stern's talking about like what a privilege it was and a blessing that, and he didn't use the word blessing. I'm using that word, but what a privilege it was to, for him in his early days to be at those small markets for his radio show. And the reason was, he says, and this, I'll try to paraphrase his words as well as I can. He says that during those days, those nights when he was at those smaller markets, he was finding his own voice so that he could create something that was worth listening to. And when he did, then he knew the audience would follow. So for anybody out there with the show or with the smaller show, you're at that point of finding your voice so that you can create something that will attract an audience and that is of enough value so that others will flock to it as well. And that's from Howard Stern. That I got from that book, his book. Like that's the kind of stuff I like to read now.
There you have it, everybody. Listen, we don't ask you for Cash Apps, Venmos, Apple Pays, or any of those things. Our goal is to lead with value, to have conversations, to help you get your foot in, squared away. But what we do ask for is your likes, your subscriptions, your reviews. If you're listening on a platform where you can leave a review, or you can go to our website, walkinvictory.me, and leave a review there. This helps these conversations get to the ears of other people. And you have been doing well as we continue to grow, but we want to push a little bit further so that someone else can know about our little show called Walking Victory. I'm your host, NaRon Tillman. This has been another episode of Walking Victory. Don't walk with your head down. Don't walk making excuses. Don't walk feeling as if your failures are there to kill you. They're there to make you stronger. And together, Adam is now a part of the Walking Victory family. We walk in victory. Peace.
All right, man. That was fun.